There's something special about coming home after a long, brutal day on the road. The only thing on my mind as I walked into our place in Lakewood was crashing into my favorite chair, Hank Duvall's handcrafted rocking masterpiece. I'd paid top dollar for it, but man, it was worth every penny. That chair had been my sanctuary, the one place where I felt completely at peace. But tonight, that peace got shattered. I stepped into the living room, ready to sink into the chair when I froze in my tracks. Right there in my chair was my wife Haley with Leo, my best friend and bandmate, locked in each other's embrace, naked, in the most disgusting, intimate way. They didn't even notice me standing there. My heart pounded, chest tightening with the weight of betrayal, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, eyes glued to the sick scene playing out in front of me, anger twisting into something darker, something I couldn't even recognize. Leo, of all people. Haley was more than just my wife. She was my muse, my rock. Leo was like my brother. But in that moment, they were nothing but traitors. And my chair, that was the final kick to the gut, that I slammed the truck door, hands gripping the wheels so hard my knuckles turned white. Crying wasn't my style, never had been. Instead, I focused on the road ahead, letting the rage simmer in my gut. No more thoughts about the mess I'd left behind. If I let them get to me, it would just fuel their victory, and I wasn't about to give them that. I packed the truck with a purpose. Clothes? Check. Guitars? Check. And the chair? Hell yes. That was mine, not hers. She might have gotten Leo for the night, but the chair was coming with me. I hoisted it into the bed of the truck, strapped it down, and stood there for a moment. The night was quiet. Too quiet. No signs of life from the house. Without a second glance, I climbed into the driver's seat and drove off. No destination in mind, just the open road. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, but told myself that all of this, all the betrayal, it wasn't worth breaking over. If Leo and Haley thought they'd win by wrecking my world, they had another thing coming. As the miles passed, I kept my eyes on the horizon, the night swallowing up Lakewood behind me. I didn't have a plan yet. But one thing was clear, this was just the beginning of something they'd regret. The road stretched ahead, empty and quiet. Just the hum of the engine and the steady beat of my thoughts. I didn't know where I was heading, but after a couple of hours, the familiar route took me towards Elmwood, my hometown. I hadn't been back there in years. Too many memories, too many ghosts. But now it felt like the only place that made sense. I wasn't looking for comfort, and I definitely wasn't looking for sympathy. But as I drove through the night, Elmwood pulled me in like it always had, a mix of nostalgia and regret clinging to every corner. My mind wandered back to the early days, before Haley, before Leo, back to when the band Wildfire was just an idea born out of sweaty garage jams with a group of guys who still had dreams. Leo and I had built something out of nothing. High school kids who thought we could set the world on fire with a guitar riff and a drumbeat. And for a while we did. Hell, we even named the band after it Wildfire. The irony wasn't lost on me as I glanced at the radio, half expecting one of our tracks to start playing just to twist the knife a little deeper. I passed by signs that used to mean something. Elmwood Diner, Max Gas, the old Rosewood Theater. Places that reminded me of the kid I used to be. The one who thought loyalty meant something. That's before I learned the hard way. Everything you build with people can come crashing down without warning. But the biggest shock came when I pulled into town and spotted someone I hadn't seen in years, Laura, that I parked outside the Elmwood Diner, engine still running as I stared through the window. There she was, Laura, my high school crush, the one that got away, or more like the one I let slip through my fingers while I chased dreams with Wildfire. I hadn't thought about her in years, but seeing her now stirred something inside me, something I couldn't quite shake. She was behind the counter, laughing with a couple of regulars. Same smile, same warmth that used to light up my whole day back when we were kids. But there was something else in her eyes now, a weight, a weariness that came with life kicking you around. I killed the engine and got out, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. As I pushed through the diner door, the bell jingled, and Laura looked up. For a second, Her eyes flickered with recognition, but she didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure if that was a good sign or a bad one. "Max," she finally asked, her voice softer than I remembered. "It's been a long time." I nodded, trying to keep things casual. "Yeah, too long. Figured I'd stop by, see what's changed." "Not much," she said with a small smile, wiping her hands on her apron. "Same old Elmwood. What brings you back?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I could have lied, but what was the point? Needed a break from the city. Things got complicated. She gave me a look that said she understood more than I'd expect. Complicated. Yeah, I know the feeling. For a second, the years melted away, and it felt like old times again. Just me and Laura, talking like we used to when life was simple, when the biggest worry was sneaking out to see her after curfew. But we weren't those kids anymore, and there was no point pretending we were. "You still playing?" she asked, glancing at the guitar case in the back of my truck through the diner window. I shrugged. "Yeah, the band's still going, but who knows for how long." I didn't mention the mess with Haley and Leo. I wasn't ready to open that can of worms just yet. She nodded, not pushing for more. "Well, if you need a place to clear your head, this is as good a spot as any. Maybe I'll take you up on that," I said, meaning it. Laura smiled, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, like she could see right through the front I was putting up. "Take care of yourself, Max," she said softly, before turning to another customer. As I left the diner, that old familiar pull of Elmwood tugged at me harder. It wasn't just the town. It was Laura. Maybe, just maybe, coming back here wasn't just about running from the wreckage of my life. It was about finding something real again. That I left the diner with a mix of emotions swirling in my gut. Seeing Laura again had stirred something, a flicker of the past, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever that meant. Life had a way of twisting things up, and I wasn't in the mood for more complications. The drive to my mom's house felt longer than it should have. The roads hadn't changed, but I had. I wasn't the same kid who left Elmwood with stars in his eyes and a guitar slung over his shoulder. The music had taken me far, sure, but it hadn't saved me from the mess my life had turned into. When I pulled up to her place, the porch light was already on, as if she'd been waiting. I hadn't told her I was coming, but that's just how moms are, they know. She opened the door before I could knock, her face lighting up with that warmth only a mother can give, the kind that tells you everything's going to be okay, even if it's not. "Max," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "It's been too long, honey. Come in, you must be exhausted." I stepped inside, the familiar smell of home hitting me. It was comforting, but also a reminder of how far I'd drifted. I dropped my bag by the door and followed her into the kitchen, where she had a pot of coffee brewing. "You look like you've been through the ringer," she said, not prying, but knowing something was off. I sighed, sitting down at the old wooden table. "Yeah, it's been a rough few days, Mom." She poured me a cup of coffee, sitting across from me. "Is it about the band? Or Haley?" I winced at the mention of her name, but didn't dodge the question. "Both, I guess. It's all falling apart, and I don't know where to even start fixing it." Mom nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "Sometimes, things aren't meant to be fixed. Sometimes, they're meant to end so something better can begin." Her words hit harder than I expected. Maybe she was right. Maybe trying to piece everything back together was pointless. I wasn't the guy who needed to save the band or salvage my marriage. Maybe I needed to let it all burn and see what was left in the ashes. "I saw Laura today," I said, changing the subject. "She's still here, working at the diner." Mom smiled knowingly. "That girl always did have a soft spot for you. She's been through her own share of heartache, but she's a good one, Max." "Yeah, I know." I took a long sip of coffee, letting the quiet settle between us. "I'm not looking to jump into anything. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing. And that's okay," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Just don't shut people out while you're figuring it out. You've got a lot of life ahead of you, Max." I nodded, appreciating her words more than I could say. I wasn't used to leaning on anyone, but maybe now wasn't the time to be stubborn. If I was going to rebuild anything, it had to start with the people who still gave a damn about me. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. For a second, I let myself relax. Lying in the bed I hadn't slept in for years, listening to the soft clinking of dishes downstairs. It almost felt like I was a kid again, before life got messy, before betrayal and fame twisted everything. But reality snapped back quick. I had unfinished business, starting with Wildfire. The band was on the verge of a record deal, a deal that could make or break us. And after what Leo pulled with Haley, the thought of being in the same room with him felt impossible. But walking away from the band, from everything we'd built, wasn't something I could do lightly either. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and checked my messages. Sure enough, there was one from our producer, Mitch. "We need to talk. Tensions are high, but the deal's on the line. Don't blow this, Max." I groaned, running my hand through my hair. Mitch wasn't wrong. This record deal was huge. But could I really keep working with Leo after what I saw? I threw on some clothes, grabbed a cup of coffee from the kitchen, and headed outside for some air. The sun was bright, the town quiet, and for a moment I thought about just saying screw it and staying in Elmwood for good. But then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Leo. "Max, we need to talk." "I know IF asterisk get up. Just hear me out." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. The audacity. Leo was the last person I wanted to hear from, but the band needed answers, and I couldn't avoid him forever. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Fine. Meet me at the studio in an hour." By the time I pulled into the studio parking lot, my blood was already boiling. Seeing Leo's car parked outside didn't help. I pushed open the door, finding him sitting on the couch, looking like a kicked dog. He stood up when I walked in, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Max, man, Save it," I snapped, cutting him off. "I don't want your apologies or excuses. I want to know how the hell we move forward after what you did, because right now I don't see how the band survives this." Leo winced, but he didn't argue. "I know I screwed up, okay? I can't undo it, but the band, the music, man, it means everything to me. We've worked too hard to throw it all away over this." I stared at him, anger bubbling up inside. "You think it's just about the band? You screwed my wife, Leo. In my house. In my chair. How do you expect me to just let that slide?" He looked down, shaking his head. "I don't. I get it, I do. And if you want me out of the band, I'll go. But you know this deal is bigger than both of us. Wildfire's bigger than both of us. Don't let me ruin this." For a moment, I didn't say anything. As much as I wanted to deck him, to let him feel even a fraction of the betrayal I felt, he wasn't wrong. Wildfire had always been bigger than the both of us. But the question was, could I really work with him knowing what he'd done? "I need time," I said finally, my voice cold. "You keep your distance, stay out of my way. I'll let you know if you're still in or not." Leo nodded, swallowing hard. "Take all the time you need, Max." "I'm sorry." I walked out without another word, my fists clenched as I left. I didn't know what decision I'd make yet, but one thing was clear. Wildfire wasn't burning as bright as it once did after that run-in with Leo. I knew the next storm was coming, and it had a name, Haley. The second I got back in the truck, her name lit up my screen, a text waiting for me. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at the message for a long minute. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window and be done with her. But another part, the one that hated unfinished business, knew I had to face her eventually. It wasn't just about Leo and the band anymore. It was about the lies, the betrayal, and the mess my life had become. I texted back, "Fine. Meet me at the old house in an hour." The house we used to call home felt like a ghost now. Every memory felt poisoned. Her laughter in the kitchen, the lazy mornings in bed, all of it just another reminder of how blind I'd been. When I walked in, it felt more like stepping into a crime scene than a home. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. The air felt thick with everything unsaid between us. It wasn't long before Haley walked in, her face pale, eyes red like she'd been crying for hours. I stood near the window, arms crossed, watching her as she awkwardly hovered by the door. Max. Her voice was soft, like she was testing the water. I'm sorry. I know there's nothing I can say to make it right, but... But what, Haley? I snapped, cutting her off. You think sorry is going to fix this? You and Leo. How long has this been going on? She flinched, the words hitting her hard. It wasn't like that. I mean, it didn't mean anything, Max. It was just a mistake. A mistake? I repeated, my voice rising. A mistake is knocking over a glass, not screwing my best friend in the house we built together. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I didn't plan for this to happen, she whispered, her voice breaking. I love you, Max. I do. I don't know. Things haven't felt right between us for a long time. You've been so focused on the band, on everything but us. I laughed bitterly. So it's my fault now, is it? Because I worked hard to build something, to make sure we didn't end up struggling? I never once put the band above you, Haley. But clearly you found something else to fill that gap. She took a step toward me, desperate, pleading. It's not like that. I know I messed up, but can we at least try to fix this? I don't want to lose you, Max. I don't. I shook my head, the anger fading into something colder. There's nothing left to fix. You broke it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, the weight of everything sinking in. Finally, Haley nodded, wiping away her tears. If this is really the end, I'll respect that. But I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't respond. What was the point? She already had. The damage was done. I watched as she turned and left, closing the door behind her softly, like she was leaving a funeral. And maybe she was. The days that followed felt like I was stuck between two worlds. On one hand, I wanted to leave everything behind, the band, the drama, the betrayals, and start over. On the other, I knew Wildfire was a part of me, the one thing that had kept me going even when everything else fell apart. And then there was Laura. Ever since I ran into her at the diner, she'd been creeping into my thoughts more and more. She wasn't like Haley never had been. Laura was the kind of person who didn't expect anything from me except honesty, something I hadn't had in my life for a long time. One evening, I found myself sitting on the edge of the lake in Elmwood, staring out at the water. The band was pressing me for decisions about the album. Leo was still hanging in the background like a bad dream, and I knew we couldn't go forward with him. But the thought of leaving it all behind, that was a different kind of weight on my shoulders. I hadn't planned on texting Laura, but before I knew it, I was typing. You up for a walk? Minutes later, she was there, showing up in that easy, no-nonsense way of hers. We walked along the edge of the lake, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her teaching job, how her son was struggling with school, how Elmwood hadn't changed much, and how she liked it that way. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm creeping back into my life. She didn't ask about the band or Haley, but she didn't have to. Somehow, she understood that I needed space to figure it out. And that's what drew me to her. There were no expectations, no pressure to make decisions I wasn't ready for. Just her company, simple and honest. As we walked back to town, I realized something. I didn't need to leave the band. I didn't need to burn it all down. What I needed was to get rid of the parts that were weighing me down, Leo, and the mess he'd made of things. I'd built Wildfire with my blood and sweat, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The next morning, I got a call from Mitch. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. Max, we've got a problem. Haley's running her mouth all over the place, telling people you were the one who ruined things between you two. She's saying you were obsessed with the band, and that you drove her to Leo. I swore under my breath, gripping the phone tighter. You've got to be kidding me? I wish I was, Mitch replied. It's already spreading, and if you don't get in front of it, it's going to look bad. Real bad. I could feel the anger rising again, but this time, it wasn't the kind that made you freeze. It was the kind that made you want to fight back. Haley had already destroyed our marriage. Now she was trying to destroy my reputation too. I'll handle it, I said. Get the press together. We're going public with the truth. The press conference was set for the following day. I spent the night pulling together everything I needed: photos, text messages, even the damn security footage from the house. If Haley wanted to play dirty, I'd show her just how messy it could get. The room was packed with reporters, hungry for drama. I stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and laid it all out. I told them the truth about the affair, about how long it had been going on, and how Haley had tried to paint me as the villain. I showed the evidence, cold and hard, leaving no room for doubt. By the time I was done, there wasn't a single person in that room who believed Haley's version of events. As I walked off the stage, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. The truth was out, and I had nothing left to hide. Once the dust settled after the press conference, the decision to cut Leo from Wildfire wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. There was no emotional goodbye, no dramatic fallout, just business. We'd built something great together, but he'd torn it down with one stupid decision. I wasn't about to let him burn the band down with it. The moment Leo was gone, things changed. The tension that had been hanging over us for months finally lifted, and for the first time in a long time, we could focus on what mattered: the music. We brought in a new guitarist, a guy named Sam, who had a raw edge and none of Leo's baggage. It didn't take long for the chemistry to click. In the studio, everything flowed. The songs felt fresh, alive. And for once, I wasn't dragging around the weight of everything else going on in my life. The new album came together faster than we'd expected. Song after song, it all poured out, raw emotion, stories of betrayal and loss, but also hope and rebirth. It was like I was putting the last year of my life into the music, letting it bleed out onto the tracks. When we finally wrapped the recording, I knew we had something special. And the world agreed. The album dropped, and within weeks it was climbing the charts faster than anything Wildfire had ever done before. The fans were still there. Hell, we'd even gained some new ones, drawn in by the story behind the music. There was no escaping the drama of what had happened with Leo and Haley, but we didn't shy away from it either. We owned it, and the fans respected that. It wasn't just about the band anymore, though. While Wildfire was thriving, something even more important was happening in my personal life. My connection with Laura had deepened. She wasn't just a distraction from the mess I'd left behind. She was something real. There was no pretense, no games with her. Just honesty. And I found myself wanting more of that, needing it in a way I hadn't before. Laura had a son, and that was new territory for me. But the kid, David, was sharp and full of energy, and spending time with him felt natural. It didn't take long for me to start seeing them both as part of my future, even though I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Elmwood, this sleepy little town I thought I'd left behind for good, started to feel like home again the day the band took off with a new album. I finalized the divorce from Haley. It wasn't pretty. Divorces never are. But the evidence of her affair and the lies she spread made things move quickly. She tried to fight back, tried to spin her version of the story to save face, but there was no coming back from the damage she'd done. In the end, I walked away with what mattered: my dignity and my freedom. The papers were signed, the split was official, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe again. No more looking over my shoulder, no more wondering if my life was about to implode. The door on that chapter was closed, and I had no intention of ever reopening it. The band started booking bigger gigs, and the buzz around the album kept growing. But as much as I loved the thrill of performing, it wasn't where I wanted to be all the time. I found myself spending more time in Elmwood, with Laura and David. The stage was great, but coming home to them felt even better. It was like finding a balance I didn't know I needed. One part rock star, one part regular guy. David and I bonded over music, and I started teaching him a few guitar chords. He wasn't just a smart kid, he had real talent, and it felt good to share that part of my life with him. Laura didn't push, didn't try to define whatever we were too soon, but the way she looked at me said everything I needed to know. We were building something here, something that went beyond just a rebound or a fling. It was real, and I was all in. The months passed in a blur of music, new beginnings, and small-town life. The band's success didn't slow down, but neither did my connection to Elmwood. Between shows and studio time, I found myself drawn back to Laura and David more and more each day. We weren't in a rush to label anything, but it was clear this was where I wanted to be. Wildfire's future was bright, and so was mine. The bitterness from Leo's betrayal and Haley's lies had faded into something I could finally let go of. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't haunted by what could have been. Instead, I was looking forward to new music, to a life with Laura, to whatever came next. As I stood on stage one night, playing to a sold-out crowd, I couldn't help but smile. I'd made it through the fire, and somehow, I'd come out the other side stronger. The old Max, the one who thought everything revolved around the band, was gone. In his place was someone who knew that life was about more than just music. It was about the people you chose to let in, and the life you built with them. And as I walked off stage, back into the arms of the woman waiting for me, I knew one thing for sure. The best was yet to come. Thanks for watching. Thumbs up, subscribe, and comment below.